asking anybody for help was a complete last resort. Like I literally exhausted options A to Z and then 1 to 100. And then you are like 101. And then even with me asking you, I'm working on a contingency plan just in case you don't pull through for me. You might think you forgave, you might think you're not bitter, you might think everything is all woosah. But if you're walking around and you always on the defense, you always in self-defense mode, you always have all of these walls up, all of these masks up, you're wearing a mask trying to protect yourself, you're wearing a mask of nonchalance because you're a sensitive person and people hurt your feelings too much, so now you try to care less. People betrayed you, so now you don't want to trust anybody. People didn't listen to you growing up, so now you don't speak, or now you feel the need to yell and talk over people. Like all of these things are going to hinder your ability for God to use you. And I had to choose between paying my school fees for my dorm or going to a doctor. And I chose to pay for the school fees. And I had to suffer until I got paid again to be able to go to the doctor. Like these are the type of sacrifices that I've had to make in my life. I have had to choose between needs and needs. So in the month of July, I will be doing a series called The Wilderness Season, where I'll be sharing my testimony, my experiences, the way God, dug deep within me to pull out some things that I didn't even know was there, and how He truly transformed my character and literally just changed me and stretched my faith. And I don't even have the words for what this wilderness season was like. But I'll be posting 2 times a week on Sundays and Wednesdays for the month of July to unpack all of these things that I learned. So if you ever felt like you were playing it safe, if you ever felt like, this is not the life that God wants me to live and I want to start over. I know I need to do the things He's calling me to do, but I'm so afraid to leave the old me behind. If you're struggling with stepping into the identity that God is calling you to live, if you find yourself running away from what God is calling you to do, if you find yourself in a wilderness season with God right now and you're trying to understand why it looks like the weapons that are forming against you look like they're prospering, this series is for you. And if you are new here, then hello and welcome to the show. My name is Sensi, and on this podcast, we talk about taking accountability for your life to become the best version of yourself. So without further ado, let us get into this week's episode. So I went through a wilderness season. I would say it started around November when I fasted, and in that fast, I felt the need to fully surrender and stop being a lukewarm Christian. And many things happened. There were many trials and tribulations. It honestly almost took me out. I'm not even going to lie. I understand wilderness seasons are necessary because it's really God shaping you and molding you and your character into the person He needs you to be for the thing that He called you to do. But that's, it sounds great in theory, but it can be very hard to go through. And I managed to keep my head above water. And in hindsight, in the moment, I didn't understand what was going on. In the moment, I literally just thought that the weapons that were being formed against me were prospering. But in hindsight, now that I'm basically out of this wilderness season, I want to share some of the lessons that I have learned, because the pieces of the puzzle started making sense in hindsight. So let's start with my foundation. I truly believe that one of the things God wanted to do in this season of my life is to rebuild my foundation. My initial foundation was very faulty. I didn't know it, but it was very faulty because it was built on pride, self-ambition, a lot of selfishness, a lot of pain, a lot of rejection, a lot of fears and worries, a lot of running away from the early parts of my life and being hyper independent and all of these things. It was a lot of pain that I was dealing with or that I had not dealt with that was suppressed within me that I didn't know of. And that was what was fueling me being such an ambitious person, me being such a driven person. And the thing is, in my walk with God as a Christian, I would say I was we were cool, but I was still very much lukewarm because I had not surrendered to His will. It was very much, I love you and everything, but these are my plans, now bless it. Because I thought I knew best. I wanted to be in control of my life. I wanted to write the script. I wanted things to go according to my plans. And God had to shake up all of that. And it was a very hard process. But in doing that, I realized how faulty my foundation was, because the thing is, if I had gotten some of the things that I wanted and I had that foundation that I was building on initially before I gave God permission to do what he wanted to do, honestly, I would not be able to last. I will not be able to withstand any pain or hardships that came my way, because my foundation already had so much pain, already had so many things that were affecting who I thought I was, my personality, my identity. And if God did not do what he did, even though it hurt, I honestly would not be able to withstand anything in life, honestly, because these things would have affected me way too much, because I truly was not able to be authentic in every room. I truly lived for external validation, in the sense that I did not want to feel rejected. I did not want to be criticized. So I was always playing it safe. I didn't want to rock the boat too much. I was very much in my comfort zone, but I thought just because I had all of this ambition that that was good enough and that would take me where I wanted it to go. And I really thought I could just have God on the sidelines. Like, I'm in the driver's seat, he's in the passenger seat, and I just need you here to protect me and to make me feel good and to bless my plans. But I did not really allow him to lead. I did not really, he could speak, he could say certain things, but it's like, at the end of the day, it was up to how I felt about it. Do I want to do that, right? And he pretty much knocked me off of my pedestal. He took me out of the driver's seat. It took a long while, okay, because we wrestled, okay? We definitely tussled for control, and I'm going to talk about all of that in subsequent parts. But right now, I want to talk about just the foundation aspect, because I truly believe that that was the whole point of that wilderness season. And then from there, he could do other things that I'm going to talk about in subsequent parts. A little backstory so you understand the context. So I grew up in St. Lucia. I spent the first 16 years of my life there, and then I moved to America, Atlanta, and then I went to school. And the thing is, before I left St. Lucia, I did not really have big dreams. I did not really see much for myself. My goal was to just be an accountant, like go study, get my ACCA, do that type of stuff, and then be an accountant. I never thought that I would leave St. Lucia, because, that's why I grew up. I didn't really picture I would ever not be there until my mother started talking about it, right? And then I moved to America, and at that point, I still wasn't dreaming big or anything. I still said, I'm just going to, get my accounting degree and work as an accountant. But the thing is, truly, 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 deep down, I knew I did not actually want to be an accountant. I knew from a very young age that I never wanted to work for anybody. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew it. I always knew it. But I did not know what business I would start. I had no idea what I actually wanted to do with my life. So I took the safe route, and, it was always encouraged to have like a respectable career, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, that type of thing. I like math, so I chose accounting. And I remember when I graduated high school in America, I only did 1 year of high school in America, and then I had to apply for colleges. When I was applying, they literally wanted me to declare my major right when I was applying. And I remember feeling so nervous, because I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. My life is literally just starting. I just became an adult. I don't know anything about this. How am I supposed to decide what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I already didn't even know. So I had accounting in my back pocket because I was good at it in St. Lucia. We were already taking accounting classes. I thought it was okay. I thought it was decently challenging, and I was, I always got good grades. So I was like, okay, I'll just do that, and it pays well. So I declared my major in accounting, and I remember my sophomore year of college, I was in my accounting 201 class, and we were doing like bank reconciliations. And I remember thinking to myself, it's like I had an out-of-body experience, and I said, I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. Like, is this really what I'm going to commit to? And immediately I canceled the thought from my mind. I immediately did not want to think about it, because I did not know what I actually wanted to do. And it was very stressful to feel like I had to know in that moment, especially since I was working to pay thousands of dollars per semester for school. But then I remember I made a pact to myself, and I said, okay, I have until the end of my sophomore year to decide what I want to do with my life. Because then in junior year, I would go into my upper accounting classes, and at that point, it would be too late to switch my major. Long story short, I did not end up figuring it out. I graduated with my accounting degree. I did not want to do accounting, so I went into finance. I started in Big Four Consulting, and I started at a firm that was my dream firm at the time. Dream firm in the sense that I realized that, okay, I don't know what I want to do, so I'm going to be in this accounting finance role. Let me just try to do it to the best of my ability, right? I interned at a Big Four consulting firm, and I remember I got there and I was like, I don't actually like this. Like, I really don't want to do this. I really like the company. I really like the people I worked with. They made it bearable. But while I was there, I was like, I actually don't want to do this. And I ended up, fortunately, getting an offer for a full-time position for that same job at that company for when I graduated. I got that offer my junior year. I went into my senior year of college with an offer for a prestigious Big Four accounting firm after college. I never had to interview. I had it before I even went into senior year. And I remember I signed that contract the day before the deadline, because the days leading up to it, I was like, Sensi, you need to figure it out. You need to figure out what you want to do with your life. And I didn't figure it out. And I remember I cried so hard. And then I signed it because I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else I want to do. And I started working there, and I loved the people I worked with. I loved the actual company. I loved everything about the job except the actual work, because I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. I always felt deep down that there was something else. There was something more. I always felt like I was different. Like there was something else. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to describe it, but I just always felt like there was something else. And it made me feel so isolated and so weird sometimes, because I didn't know how to articulate it and I didn't know what it was. It was just a feeling that I had no clarity on, no insight on, and I couldn't shake it. And I worked at, that Big Four consulting firm for almost 3 years, and then I left. It took so much for me to leave because it was like a step of faith. I was playing it safe at that point in my life. I was hiding behind the prestige of the career and the firm and the perks and all of these things. And I could not silence a voice inside of me, that whisper inside of me that kept telling me that I was meant for more. I didn't know what more was. I could not silence it. And I wrestled with it for so long. And I felt like the longer I stayed in corporate, the more I was betraying myself. And so I took a sabbatical to figure my life out. I did not figure my life out. So I went back to corporate. And then after I left my last job, I decided to take another sabbatical and then really push and really try to figure out, really challenge myself to not go back. Then I still could not really put my finger on it. Like the entrepreneurship thing was more than I anticipated. And I said, you know what? Fortunately, I have my career. I have that as a backup plan. I'm going to go back. When I decided that I was going to go back a few months ago, earlier in the year, I felt God, I felt many signs saying, do not go back. I was like, Lord, what are you talking about? I'm living off of my savings. What are you talking about? Are you going to pay these bills? Are you going to pay these bills? Because one thing about me, I didn't grow up with much, I grew up in very humble beginnings. Money was typically an issue. So one of the things that really motivated me to work in my career and be so ambitious and have a high paying job was me running away from where I started. I didn't want to end up back there. There was a lot of financial trauma in my life from not having enough. And I worked my behind off to have a high paying job because I never wanted to experience that again. So immediately when I kept getting signs and Bible verses and sermons, and every time I talk to God, it's something about, I need you to trust me. That's what came up for me, because I was like, God, you know what I've been through? I've worked very hard to have these opportunities, to have this safety net. I need to use it because I do not want to ever struggle in life again. And I managed to push past that. I was like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. And that is when my foundation started being tested. One of the reasons I'm able to process life the way I do and share what I share on this podcast is because I reflect and journal a lot. So I created these digital journals to help you have your own breakthrough moments instead of just listening to mine. And they will help you check in with your faith, heal from things you didn't realize you were carrying, and get real with yourself about your relationships and the cycles you keep repeating. And don't worry, they're not boring prompts. I added my usual spice so I can lovingly check you outside of the podcast too. You're welcome, bestie. Love you. So if you're ready to start doing the inner work, head to secludedthoughts.com/journals. Now back to the episode. That is when my foundation started being tested, because in leaving my job, in deciding to not go back, in deciding to trust God with whatever He has up His sleeve that I do not know, I literally have felt like I have been on an emotional roller coaster. I have felt like my life has been spiraling. I have felt like I have been spiraling and just losing my mind, all because of me wanting to avoid the financial trauma that had taken up so many years of my life. I had dealt with it so much in my childhood, growing up, and then in college again. I had to work up to 2 jobs to pay for school while being a full-time student, and then still not being able to have enough to pay and having to do the payment plan, and literally crying every spring semester because I didn't have enough time in between like fall and spring break to work to get enough money to pay. So I was literally like breadcrumbing, like barely eating, rationing, like really struggling. And financial struggles and difficulty marked so much of my life. And that really pushed me to do well in my career so I can have, a high paying job and I would not ever have to deal with that again. And that was my reality. I was fined, right? For the first time in my life at 23, I think, when I started that job, 22 or 23, that was when I finally could exhale. I could finally put my bills on auto pay. I could finally go grocery shopping and not have to budget or look at the price. I had a budget, but it was good enough where I did not have to be counting pennies, right? For the first time in my life at 22 or 23 when I started my job, that was when I finally had financial freedom to just relax, and I didn't have to have all of the stress of trying to figure things out. So when God said, don't go back, that's what I thought about. I was like, Lord, I'm not trying to go through that again, right? And in the process of me trusting Him and not going back, I have literally felt like I have been spiraling, because in doing that, God has unpacked so much of how all of these things had built a foundation for me that was very faulty, because it was rooted in a lot of pain and trauma. The hardships that I dealt with in the wilderness season, watching my savings dwindle, literally made me almost lose my mind. I was like, Lord, I have an option to not go through this. The moment I committed to God and I said, okay, fine, I'm going to trust you, I started getting recruiters in my inbox offering me literally a 50% salary increase. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I said, Lord, if I'm going to go back, because at one point I was applying before I decided to trust Him. I was like, God, if I want to go back, I want this number. As soon as I committed and I said, God, I'm going to trust you, the number was the minimum offer that these recruiters were reaching out to me with. And I was like, Lord, well, if this is a sign, let me know, because this is what I asked for. So I feel like this is from you. But the more and more I asked, the more and more I prayed, I kept getting, it was very clear that He wanted me to trust Him. And it stressed me out a lot, but I was like, okay, cool. And in the process of trusting Him, He revealed to me how my foundation was so terrible. My foundation was essentially built on sand, and any slight wind would have completely knocked me off of my game, completely set me back so far. I don't even know if I would be able to recover. In hindsight, I can see that because while I'm working my job, obviously I have my podcast. I've been podcasting for years, right? And with a platform, sometimes you get negative comments, sometimes you get, certain things. There's a lot of pressure to, keep performing. Sometimes there's a pressure to produce things that you think people want to see, pressure to produce things that go viral, things that perform well, even if it's not always what you want to create sometimes. Like, there's a lot that goes into this, and God made me see that with my foundation, I would not be able to be effective in what He wanted me to do because all of the pain created way too many problems, and I'm going to unpack that in this series. There are many episodes where I talked about some of these things, like when God revealed to me that my pride and self-reliance was preventing me from trusting Him, me living for external validation, me trying to keep up with appearances because everybody thought I always just had it all together, and how that felt like. And then, God telling me I'm arrogant because I refuse to trust Him. Like, all of these things I learned in that wilderness season. And I realized that God put me through all of that because He wanted to show me that my foundation was faulty and I would never be able to sustain the things that I was asking for had He not rebuilt it with Him as the rock, with Him as my foundation. My foundation up until this point was self-reliance, arrogance in the sense that I thought I knew better than God. I thought my plans were better than His, and He had to get with my program. Okay, don't act like you've never been there. Okay, I know it's not just me. I thought, He had to get with my program. My plans were better than His. I thought I knew better. I thought that just because I had always been committed to self-improvement and I had always been a reflective person and an introspective person, that there was nothing wrong with me that I didn't know of and wasn't actively working on. I never thought I was perfect, but I think because I was so introspective and because I've always been committed to personal growth, hence why the whole podcast is what it is, I thought I knew all of my flaws. And when He started revealing certain things to me, I was like, who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Me? It couldn't be. Me? It took me off guard, not because I thought I was so great, but because I thought that I was aware of certain things. Through God revealing what was in my heart, that scripture that says, creating me a clean heart, that psalm that David prayed after the whole incident with Bathsheba, because he didn't know what was truly in his heart. I started praying that during my fasts, during my wilderness, and that is where I messed up, because the things God revealed to me I would have never thought. And that's why I realized it's so important to partner with God, to partner with the Holy Spirit, because we have so many blind spots that we obviously don't know and we don't see, and these things will really hinder you, not just in your calling but in life in general, in your relationships, because you don't know everything about yourself. That's why the Bible says the heart is deceitful, right? Our heart is wicked. If you think you know your blind spots, if you think you know all the things wrong with you, I challenge you to just ask God to reveal to you what is actually in your heart, and prepare to be surprised, because I was certainly surprised. There was so much pain in my heart that I did not know was still there. I had a problem. I'll be honest. I had a problem. I'm still working on it. Mind your business. Okay. I've realized that I have a tendency to intellectualize my feelings instead of feeling them. And I have a tendency to acknowledge certain flaws about myself, things I need to work on. And sometimes that makes me believe that the awareness or the acknowledgement is enough to catch myself when I'm doing it. And that is not always true, because I can say, okay, sometimes I could be better about communication, but God will come in and add to that and say, did you know the reason why you struggle with communication in this particular situation is because of the fear and rejection that's in your heart? And I'll be like, what are you talking about? And He'll take me back to something, help me deal with that, and then I will be better at communication. But I was deluded into thinking that I could really do this self-improvement, personal growth thing on my own. The first I would say 2.5 years. Most of my podcast is me sharing the lessons and things that I have learned based on my personal introspection, my personal reflection time, my personal growth, looking at myself, taking accountability, that type of thing. It was all me, right? I really was my own therapist. And a lot of it was me intellectualizing my feelings instead of actually feeling them. But when I decided to partner with God, when I decided to let God have his way, he truly showed me the difference between intellectualizing your emotions, like just explaining it, versus feeling it. Intellectualizing your emotions is like saying, oh yeah, my father wasn't in my life when I was growing up, and I probably have issues with relationships and men and because of the lack of that father figure. Feeling your emotions is feeling the pain of what it was like to be heartbroken, to be naive, to be taken advantage of, to not be protected, to think about all of the painful things that have happened to you because you weren't protected, because your father wasn't there. Feeling those things and actually having an emotional release. Intellectualizing is just making you acknowledge that, yeah, he wasn't there and it probably affected me. With God, I could not intellectualize. I could not do that with God. With God, it was like the way he revealed things to me, the way he helped me connect the dots, like I just did in that example, it forced me to have an emotional release. And only in having that emotional release was I truly able to start healing and picking up the pieces and letting him, patch me up so I can truly be a better person, so he can develop my character, so he can produce fruit in me, right? The fruits of the spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? That is the difference that I have been learning, because for the past few years, I'm telling you, my podcast, the lessons, all of that was really just me going through the motions of life, reflecting. And I'm like, oh, I learned this. Oh, I learned that. And then, coming and share these things to you. And that was great. But with letting God take over, I didn't even realize that he would give me such a different perspective on my personal growth journey. I thought it was just like building me up to be a better person. But like, I have seen how self-improvement and personal growth really takes on a different meaning, really takes on a deeper level of introspection and emotional release when you do it with God. You can sit and read a bunch of self-help books, which I have. But when you say, God, help me heal from this, or God, help me be a better person, or God, create in me a clean heart, oh, sweetheart, it's going to be deep. Prepare yourself for that emotional release. And that's just a little tidbit, because now I feel like I have a deeper perspective to share my experiences with self-improvement on my podcast now that I let God take over, versus me just intellectualizing my emotions and feeling things, right? It has made me more effective in my calling. It has made me more effective with my podcast, because I can tell you more than high-level tips like be disciplined, be motivated, do this, do that. No, I will share the actual process of what it looks like to actually heal and let God change you, so you actually become a better person. You actually become the best version of yourself. So let's talk about how he shifted my foundation, okay? And some of the things that happened. I went from being the type of person who had God in the passenger seat to putting him in the driver's seat. In doing that, I had to learn to trust him, truly trust him. And spoiler alert, if everything looks amazing, that's not trust, okay? That's essentially a guarantee. Like if you have $1 million in your bank account and your $1,000 rent is due tomorrow, you don't need trust in God to trust that you can pay your bills. That's not required, right? It's when you have like 2 cents in your bank account and rent is due. That's when you have to trust him, right? So in that process, I learned to trust him. I learned to let go of control, something that was very hard to do. There will be whole separate parts on these 2 things alone because of how much it took. And I also had a lot of deep-seated pain, rejection, resentment, all these things built up inside of me that I was unaware of. I was walking around thinking I had forgiven everybody and I was all, peaceful and everything. But that was because, again, I was intellectualizing my emotions and I thought awareness was the same as healing. Clock me. And then pride and selfishness and living for external validation, greed, and all of these things. So let's talk about that. So my initial foundation was rooted in the pain and rejection that I had felt, the trauma that I experienced growing up, all of these different experiences that had shaped my life had created different self-defense mechanisms in me. They created different personality traits because I had been doing it for so long. I assumed that that was part of my personality when really it was just something that I started doing in order to protect myself, right? I was essentially being a shell of myself. I did not want to be vulnerable at all. I reserved parts of me for God and God alone, or a very select few people in my life, because I was just always in defense mode, right? I was always on the defense, always trying to protect myself because I had been hurt so much in my life. And the problem with that is if you are walking around with a lot of pain, a lot of resentment, and all of these things, and you don't even know it, right? It's one thing if you know, it's another thing if you don't even know. You think you're all good, but you don't even know it. These things are affecting you. You don't realize it yet. You don't know how it's affecting you because you didn't even know you had it, but these things are affecting you. Let me give you some examples in my personal life, and hopefully you can find yourself in my story. An example is with the hyper independence and the self-reliance and the pride and all of these things that stem from the rejection of, having to take care of myself a lot from a very early age. That made me very closed off to people. That made me a very hyper independent person. It made me unable to rely on people. It made me unable to even rely on God, unable to even trust God. It made me a control freak in a sense that I felt like in order for things to get done the way I wanted it to, I had to be the one to do it. I couldn't leave it to anybody. And then if I had to actually ask people, I rarely ever asked for help with anything at all. And if I actually had to ask for help, understand that asking for help, asking anybody for help was a complete last resort. Like I literally exhausted options A to Z and then 1 to 100. And then you are like 101. And then even with me asking you, I'm working on a contingency plan just in case you don't pull through for me. That is what it looked like for me to ask for help, if I ever asked for help, right? And the thing about that is, how are you supposed to develop genuine relationships with people, allow people to show up for you, not go through life carrying a burden and then further resenting other people around you because you're carrying a burden when you refuse to actually let people help you carry that burden? You refuse to actually let people in. God made me realize that all of these defense mechanisms that I had, all of these things that I was doing to protect myself because I had been hurt, because I had felt rejected, it was causing me to have very shallow relationships. It was causing me to really not be able to open up to people, not be able to trust people. It made me keep people at a distance. We are not meant to be alone, right? So if you are operating in a way where you let your pain, your rejection, your trauma, your depression, whatever you went through, dictate how you act in your relationships, you are never going to have genuine and solid relationships, and that is going to be an issue for you. It's going to affect you sooner or later, right? And the thing is, as a Christian, we're called to love one another. There's a higher standard for us in terms of how we are supposed to be treating people. Now, if I have all of these things about me that's making me closed off, how effective can I be? Not just in my relationships, but in my calling, in rooms that God wants me to walk into. If I'm walking into it with all of these defense mechanisms because I feel like it's my responsibility to protect myself, and I have not always done a great job at it. So I have all of these walls up because I don't trust God to protect me, right? Because I'm still choosing to carry all of that pain. If you have all of these walls up, you might think you forgave. You might think you're not bitter. You might think everything is all woosah. But if you're walking around and you always on the defense, you always in self-defense mode, you always have all of these walls up, all of these masks up, you're wearing a mask trying to protect yourself, you're wearing a mask of nonchalance because you're a sensitive person and people people hurt your feelings too much, so now you try to care less. People betrayed you, so now you don't want to trust anybody. People didn't listen to you growing up, so now you don't speak, or now you feel the need to yell and talk over people. Like, all of these things are going to hinder your ability for God to use you, and it's going to make you, it's not going to make you the best in your relationships. And I mean relationships of all kind, family, friends, significant other, etc. When people choose to walk around carrying their pain, and I said choose because you have a choice to let it go, right? It wasn't your fault what happened, but it's your responsibility to heal from it, so you can be the best version of yourself, so God can use you, and so the people in your life can have the best version of you. It is your responsibility to heal from it. And sometimes we are deceived by thinking that simply being aware of things, simply intellectualizing our emotions and being able to connect the dots and see how this affected you and that affected you, that's not the same as healing. That's not the same as addressing it. That's not the same as forgiveness. And even the awareness of that might not help you do better when the situation comes for you to do better, right? Because you're not actually doing anything about it. You're just connecting the dots. You're up here, right? That's how God clocked me. Another example is greed in my life, right? Now, the way greed ended up showing up in my life was because I had all of that financial trauma, because I had always been in a financially unstable situation for the majority of my life. I made money like my number one goal. Applying for jobs, salary was the absolute first thing, okay? I'll figure out the rest later. Salary, compensation, the perks, the benefits, that was my number one thing, okay? We'll figure out the rest later, because I simply just did not want to feel that sense of financial instability again. That is very traumatic. It is very traumatic to not know where the money for something that you need is going to come from. It's also even hard to just simply want something, want to treat yourself, but you have to restrict yourself instead because you cannot afford it, right? And then your needs, having basic needs that you have to choose between which needs are going to be met. Like, that's a very traumatic thing to go through, especially if you've been through that like most of your life. So for me, my ambition, and I'm telling you, I used to be such a very driven, ambitious, goal-oriented, would study for my accounting exams from like 8 a.m. to 1 in the morning, like all day, determined, right? Started a blog. I had a whole blogging business that I started in college. It started making money after I graduated, but I had a whole blogging business in college that I started that I grew to be very successful before I sold it. And all of that drive, all of that ambition, all of that discipline was rooted in me running away from where I came from. And because of that, money was the number one goal. Now, if money is the number one goal, you're going to sacrifice things in the process. So sometimes I sacrificed my relationships for money, for work, right? I chose to work and make money instead of showing up for people sometimes. I chose to work and make money instead of pouring into myself sometimes, or taking breaks when I needed it, or prioritizing self-care. I chose to literally sacrifice my sleep, my health, my well-being, literally everything, just for the sake of being successful, because I knew the pain of struggling financially and I did not want that to continue to be my life. That's a very hard thing to go through. Like, even in college, while I was in school, I had a 4.0 plus GPA. It was like 4.07 or something. I maintained a 4.0 GPA while I was working up to 2 jobs, up to 18 credit hours, right, in school, because I knew, number one, I needed the job, I needed the money, because that's how I paid for school. I had to work to pay for school. The financial aid I got still was not enough, so I had to work to pay for the difference. And then I knew I had to keep my grades up in order to be eligible for certain scholarships and some of the financial aid that I got. So that was a priority to me. I also, I like to hold myself to a standard of excellence. If I'm going to do something, I want to be the absolute best that I can be at it. I really want to like pour myself into it. So because I committed to that degree, even if I knew that's not what I wanted to do, I was going to do a good job at it, right? So my priorities in school was my GPA, my grades, and my job, working. Everything else, including my health, suffered because of it. I was willing to sacrifice absolutely everything else just so I would not have to struggle in life again, just so I would not have to be choosing between my needs. Like there was a time where I had to choose between paying for something for school and buying groceries in college. Like these are the type of trade-offs I had to make. There was a time in college where in the middle of spring semester, you would have to pay a deposit for your dorm in the fall semester. And I remember I got sick around that time and I literally could not speak. It hurt to swallow. I had to like open my mouth to drool at night because I could not swallow. I had to put a towel under my head and drool because that's how much pain I was in. And I had to choose between paying my school fees for my dorm or going to a doctor. And I chose to pay for the school fees and I had to suffer until I got paid again to be able to go to the doctor. Like these are the type of sacrifices that I've had to make in my life. I have had to choose between needs and needs. And it was actually traumatizing. Like there's all different types of trauma. I don't feel like people talk enough about financial trauma. So it was traumatizing for me to have to choose not between wants and needs, but between needs and needs. There was another time I had to choose between paying my school fees, spending the last $75 in my account, or buy groceries. And if I did not pay it because it was 5 p.m. was the deadline, I would have to be dropped from the semester. And I'm literally frantically running around trying to figure out how to do that. And I paid the school fees and I just did not eat. Like literally, these are the type of decisions that I've had to make in my life because of financial instability. So it was literally traumatizing to choose between this need and that need. It wasn't wants versus need. It wasn't shopping versus school. It was like health versus school. That was traumatizing. So I became so driven and so ambitious to make money by any means not any means necessary. Okay, not any means necessary, but I was willing to sacrifice my health, sacrifice everything because I knew that once I graduated, I would be able to get a job in a high paying field and I would finally have a sense of relief. So I made those sacrifices, but it was traumatizing. So money was my absolute goal. I chose things based on how much it would pay me just so I would not have to experience that type of financial instability again. And the thing is, when God is calling you to do something, when God calls you to do something, there will be provision, right? Provision will follow. But the thing is, God sends blessings and the enemy sends counterfeits. Now, if I'm not dealing with that financial trauma and I'm operating from that place of greed where money is my main priority, when the enemy sends counterfeits or traps, I will end up getting myself stuck in something because I wanted to take everything that came my way because I wanted to make the most money. You see what I mean? So as God was revealing to me how all of these traumatic situations, how all of that unresolved pain and resentment in my heart was affecting me, He showed me how I could not possibly be effective in the rooms that He was calling me into, in the things that He wanted me to do until I had addressed those things. I could not possibly say, okay, well, I'm ambitious. Okay, well, I'm being obedient. I'm doing the things, but let's work on my character later. Let's avoid that and just give me the things that I want because I'm doing it. God had to work on my character. He had to bring me through that wilderness season so He can bring up all of those things and dig and dig and dig and dig and dig beneath the surface and dig out all of that pain and resentment and bring it to me, because there's no way I could be effective or even a good human being if I had not dealt with those things, because these things affect everything in your life, not just your calling. They affect your relationships, they affect your self-esteem, your identity, the way you show up. Like, you cannot just have all of these things unresolved and just be begging God to like bless you with what it is you're asking Him for. He has to work on your character first. And in me going through that process, which was very tumultuous, okay, we'll get into the details of what that looks like. in the other parts. But in hindsight, the foundation I was able to build in God, when he brought all of these storms my way, when I started spiraling because I wasn't used to, like, not having income coming in and living off of my savings. Fortunately, I was good with savings because, again, financial trauma, I was going to have some money in the bank, right? But even if I have money in the bank, I don't want the money in the bank to be what I'm relying on. I still need income, right? Because, again, I don't want to deal with these things. In having to deal with these things, because I chose to trust God, it literally brought up so much. It literally brought up so many feelings, so much like stress in me, so much crying. And it was because in allowing myself to be in that position, I realized how much that financial trauma had affected me. I realized how money was an idol because it was the one thing that gave me a sense of control. And when God asked me to give it up and trust Him, I felt like I was out of control. And control for me meant protection. Lack of control meant me being vulnerable and unprotected. So when He asked me to do that, I had to battle with all of these things. I had, like, all of the past pains and hurts and traumas and stuff that I had dealt with resurfaced, and that's why it was so hard. That's why it was an emotional roller coaster, because it wasn't as simple as just leaving the job. Me leaving the job unpacked so many things. It showed me how I tied my identity to my career, to success, to certain accolades. It showed me the pride and self-reliance. It showed me how I was never going to be able to trust God and do what He says so long as I had some change in my bank account. Let me just be honest, because to me the money meant control. Money meant freedom. Money meant I can do whatever I want and have the freedom to leave and do whatever because I can financially support whatever decision that I wanted to make. So when God told me to do certain things, it made me so arrogant to think that just because I had the money in my account, I could afford to say no to God. Because if God wanted me to do something, I didn't have a sense of urgency if I had another income stream. But when He took away the income stream, when He required me to trust Him, now I don't have that safety net. Now I'm in blind and I have to trust Him. So now I'm uncomfortable. Now there's a sense of urgency because the spending isn't matching the income. Now I have to trust Him. Now my obedience is imperative, right? It was such a transition, and I would have fathomed that simply deciding to start over and leave my job would make me go through all of these lessons. But I have learned so much. Now I'm at a place where I literally trust God to a point where I told myself, if I run out of money, if I lose absolutely everything, I know that God is a God of restoration because of the experiences that I've had. I was like, even if I lose everything, I know He will restore me. But I cannot let the money control me like I've let it control me for so long because of the financial traumas that I have experienced in my life. I had to let go of it so that God could come for that idol. He could never come for the idol of money in my life so long as I was making it, because that was my safety net. That was my control. Money really heightened my free will. I could do whatever I want if I knew I had the money in my account. But as soon as God asked me to not go back and trust Him, I realized, oh, I kind of have to, listen, I have to be obedient because I don't have the same options that I would have if I went back to my career. So it has literally brought me to a point of humility that in hindsight, I'm truly grateful for, because I truly think that I'm becoming a much better person. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes it still concerns me, but at the end of the day, I'm just like, am I going to focus on the situation, or am I going to focus on the God in control of the situation? Like it has called me to such a deeper level of trust. It has called me to such a deeper level of surrender, and the discomfort of Him ripping my foundation apart and showing me how Simple wins, simple trials, simple tribulations would literally cause me to crumble under pressure because of all the pain and resentment that I had built my ambition on, that I had built my identity on. In him showing me that and allowing me to heal, giving me the time and the provision to heal and work on these things and go through these things, I have now built a foundation in God. I have built a foundation to where the faith that I have sometimes concerns me. Sometimes I even disassociate and I'm like, what if I'm literally making all of this up and it's all in my head? But at this point, God has given me way too many experiences and encounters and coincidences that I cannot deny his hand on my life. I cannot deny it. And there is power in that, because now when I stand in him. Before, I was relying on myself. Before, it was my own strength. It was me doing my own introspection of what is going on in my life so I can make episodes. It was me running on fumes sometimes because I was running on me. I was backing on me. I was in control. I was doing this. I was doing that. But now he has brought me to a place in knowing that if he calls me to a thing, he will back me up. He will support me, right? He has stretched my faith to a point where I've been so uncomfortable that I thought I was spiraling. But I have seen how now it has produced a level of faith in me that I don't think that I could have walked into the next season of my life without, or this season of my life without. I truly don't think I could have, in hindsight, now that I've seen all the things that he has removed, I know now that I was literally a ticking time bomb. You know how crazy that is? How scared yet grateful that makes me feel at the same time? To know that, number one, God loved me enough to have me go through all of that in private and not in public. To show me all of that in private before I, got to a position where I could really mess up my life with all of these things that were inside of me. And then like just the gratitude of seeing how much it has changed me and surviving. Truly, I am truly grateful to have survived that, because when I tell you, it was like I felt like I was getting hit from every corner. Like the weapons were forming, but the weapons were all of the deep-rooted pain and resentment and rejection that was in my heart that I didn't know. Because for the longest time, I was intellectualizing everything and just, letting awareness be enough. Just like thinking my way through healing. But in that, I had to feel some things, okay? God made me experience the practical pain, the actual pain of what it means to experience those traumatic events and how they affect me, how they affect my decisions, how they affect my ability to trust him, how they affect my ability to show up, to be authentic, to not live for external validation, all the things that I've been talking about on the previous episodes. I am grateful to have gone through that, because I would have never known that all of these things were within me and hindering me, and I had no idea. And I'm walking around feeling healed. So I am truly grateful for that experience. I am truly grateful for him rebuilding my foundation. Now, in the next part, I'm going to talk to you about the struggles of what it was like to actually trust God and let go of control, because these are the parts that almost took me out. I'm going to go in depth on my experiences and why it was so hard for me to do that. Coming up on the next episode, I'm really trying to let go, God, but I feel like you take it too far sometimes. Why do you wait last minute? Why don't you just feel the need as soon as I become aware that it's a need, so I don't have to be so anxious and fearful and worrisome and have to deal with all of these emotions? You have the ability to feel it. Why don't you just feel it immediately? Why do you make me wait? And then I went back further. I was like, okay, God, well, if we look at my childhood, you met me before I almost ended things. But prior to that point, why were you silent? If you saw how I felt, if you saw the confusion in my heart, if you saw the things in my life, why didn't you do anything about it? Why wait till I was pretty much done with life to show up when you could have done something sooner? You let bad things happen to me. I feel like that's why I'm having a hard time trusting you, because I don't know if you let me down again. because people don't always talk about that. They tell you to just trust God. No, I need some answers first. He helped me understand that I used my free will to blaspheme. And that's when I realized I messed up.